It's that simple. Now, I meant to get into, when I was teaching, this second page right here. This is every time the word horizo is mentioned. Let me erase some of this up here. Let me go ahead and erase it all. Y'all got the title down. This will be the second one in this series. I don't believe you can preach predestination in one message or two messages. It takes a lot. I'm going to veer off the course this coming Sunday. I'm going to be teaching on what's going on in Israel. Is this a sign of the end? And the answer is an absolute yes. It's a sign of the end coming. I'm going to go into all of those nations that are attacking Israel. They all have to attack at once. They're going to attack as a confederacy. They're going to get together. And this is in the 38th chapter of Ezekiel. I'm going to go through that completely. All right. Now, horizo, pro-horizo means to be forebound for the light. Whenever you have a horizo, if you have horizo, I go and put the H there. And if you look it up in an analytical lexicon, you got to learn your alphabet to do that. You look it up in an analytical lexicon, look up the word horizo. Anytime it has, it'll tell you if it's what tense it is. If they have A-O-R-I-N-D, if they have that be showing that's an aorist indicative. Every time it's aorist indicative, that means it is past tense. Past tense. Therefore, by the tense of the verb, if it's got aorist indicative showing that that's horizo, you can actually put pro on there because of the tense of the verb. Pro horizo is past tense. Pro means past. If it says aorist indicative, you might as well go ahead and put pro on there. Pro horizo. It's always there are other aorist indicative words, aorist indicative verses. There is an aorist indicative consumative. There's an aorist indicative constative. There's an aorist indicative ingressive. Where'd you get this? Out of a Greek book. I study the Greek books. I know a lot of people don't think I do, but I do. A consumative means it happened in the past and it's done. If I said Jesus died on the cross, that happened one time. If I say I have to die daily, that's a constative. If ingressive means, it's real confusing between a constative and an ingressive. I always explain ingressive this way. When I sold real estate, if you have a road here, and you have a house here, and a house here, and a house here, and there's a field back here, and you got that on the market for sale, but there's no way in there, the man closest to you has to give you an ingress into your land. That's required in Tennessee. It's called an ingress. That's why it's hard to tell the difference between an ingressive. Ingressive could stop somewhere down the line. Let's say some prophecy or something like that. Constative means it continues and is from now on. But if it says aorist indicative, it's always past tense. So therefore, if you've got an horizo, that's aorist indicative, you can put prohorizo, turns it into predestinate. All right, let's look at some of these. Let's look at some of these horizos. 8 times the word horizo is used in the Bible. 8 times. You can't just come up and make it mean whatever you want it to mean. Let's read some of these. Let me put this back. All right. The first time it's mentioned, well, not the first time, the first one I put at the top of the page. If you'll notice, horizo means, I gave the definition of it up here. Horizo means a boundary line. I keep saying, if Israel is shaped like Tennessee, like this big, like that, and if this was Israel, the horizo or the horizon is the inside, because horizon is the light, is the truth. You can call it all the same thing. The border is a form of horizo. It's called horos. Horos. There's a diacritical more. That's called the boundary. Every time you find boundary in the Old Testament, when it was translated in the Septuagint, they translated it to horos. That's the border. Every time you find border, it's translated in the Septuagint, LXX. The Septuagint was the first translation of any part of the Bible, first translation. They translated the Old Testament Hebrew into Greek. And this was approximately 200 BC, 200 years before Christ. It was Alexander the Great who died in 323 BC that had given all the world all of its dialects of Greek. So they thought, well, since the world is speaking Greek, we need to put the Old Testament Hebrew into a Greek text. And they did that. There were 70 translators. LXX is 70. It means Septuagint anytime you see it. They tell us that the Septuagint is the strongest translation of any part, anything that's ever been translated. That these guys were brilliant scholars in Hebrew and Greek that translated, and there were 70 of them. So when they translated the word border, you got it all through the Old Testament. I got a list of them right here. This is every time you find the word border in the Old Testament. These 2 pages. I've got it's a Hebrew equivalent to Word Study Concordance. It's called an Englishman's Concordance. It'll give you every time a word's mentioned, and I'm highlighted in yellow, removing the ancient landmark is the word horos in the Septuagint, landmark again, border, seashore, coast. It means the border of Israel was called the horos, which comes from the word horizo. Now let's continue to look at these words, horizo. Look at Romans 1 and 4. That Christ was declared to be the Son of God with power, according to the Spirit of holiness, by the resurrection from the dead. See that word declared? It's the word horizo. Horizo. There it is. But here's the thing. When you look this up in an analytical lexicon, it's going to tell you that it is a participle. You say, Jim, that sounds hard. It's not hard. If I explain it to you simply, it's a participle. A participle is the same thing as an adjective, except it's a verbal adjective. It's going to describe, I keep telling you, adjectives tell which, what kind of, or how many. That's what adjectives always tell. How many? And they modify. Modify means to alter. It puts a condition on it. Means to alter. Verbs, modifies nouns and pronouns. I've started going to adverbs. Modifies nouns and pronouns. So we got to look at, what does this say? It doesn't tell how many, declared, doesn't tell how many. It doesn't tell what kind of, it tells which Son of God. He was the, in fact, you can leave out to be. To be is actually always used on an infinitive, but this isn't an infinitive. Declared to be the Son of God with power. Declared is an infinitive. It says, what it actually says, that he was declared Son of God. He was declared Son of God. The way you can think about an adjective, think of how many. I'll tell you, put it this way. Here's a way to say an infinitive in English. The flying eagle. Flying is normally a verb. Fly. Flap your wings and fly. The flying eagle attacked the wolf. Attacked the wolf. Well, this would be an adjective in this case, because it's going to tell which. It's the flying wolf. And in English, most of your infinitives, your participles end with ing. They're usually ing words in English. Now, so Christ was declared to be the Son of God with power, according to the Spirit of holiness, by the resurrection from the dead. It's also genitive case. That means declared possesses the Son of God. He's the declared Son of God, or the horizo Son of God. Now look at Luke 22:22. And truly the Son of Man goeth as it was determined. This is also a participle. It means you take the main subject and put this, in our language, we put the adjectives right in front of the noun they modify. But they don't do that in Greek. And the main subject is the Son of Man. Determined. He's the determined Son of Man. And that makes him the participle. And then we go to Acts 2:23. Being delivered by the determinate counsel of God. This is also a participle. It's determinate counsel. The determinate counsel is which counsel it was. Which, what kind of, how many. Then we go on down to the next one. The next one, he commanded us to preach unto the people and to testify that it is he which was ordained, is one word in the Greek, it's horizo. Horizo is also a participle. This is the which was ordained Son.
Which verse is that?
Huh?
Where's that verse?
Huh?
Where's that verse you're reading?
I'm reading Acts 10:42. To testify that he which was ordained, this is the which was ordained he. Which was ordained modifies he. It tells you which son it was. And that's also a participle. Now, in verse 29, you've got an aorist indicative, past tense. But in verse 29, this is something the disciples horizoed. Then the disciples, every man according to his ability, determined horizo to send relief to the brethren which dwelt in Judea. That's aorist indicative. That's because they did it in the past. They'd already determined it. It's past tense. Now the next verse, I'm going to read it to you out of my Bible. This is one of my favorite verses. Acts 17. Acts 17. This is the next time it's used. 17 and 26. I love this verse. I mean, I dearly love it. I use this often. Acts 22. Acts 17, 26. I don't know what I'm thinking of. Acts 17 and verse 26. And, well, let's read 25 and 26. God is neither worshipped with man's hands, as though he needed anything, seeing he giveth to us all life and breath and all things. And God hath made of one blood, Adam and Eve, all nations for to dwell upon the face of the earth, and hath determined horizo. But notice what he's determined. He has put in the light. He has determined the times. Horizo, the times. O-R-I-Z-O. You see, it's not the word predestinate, it's the word horizo, pro-horizo. The reason people don't like predestination, it sounds like God is a fatalist and he's planned some people to go to hell before they're born. No matter what they do. That's not predestination. God has to work in his people to willing to do of his good pleasure. He's determined the times, the kairos. K-A-I-R-O-S. Kairos, we get the word C-H-R-O-N-O-S. Or chronometer. A chronometer is a measurement that people use on the sea to measure time. So God has determined horizo, the timing of everything. It reminds me of that first verse up there that I had previously, that when Peter and John were taken by the Pharisees in Acts the 3rd chapter and threatened and said, if you speak in this man's name anymore, I'm going to beat you. And they went back to the other apostles and they began to pray in the name of Jesus, even though they were under the threat of the Pharisees. And they said, Lord, you're in heaven, and they've crucified and killed your Holy One, Jesus. And Pilate was there that day, and Herod was there that day, and the Roman soldiers were there, and the people were there crying, crucify him! And they were therefore to do whatsoever thy hand and thy counsel determined before prohorizo to be done. God predestinated the death of Christ by the hands of evil men, and that was murder. God preordained murder in their hearts. Boy, people don't like that, do they? What do you mean God planned it? Jesus said, no man takes my life from me. I lay my life down. I could call 10 legions of angels and beat all of you. All he needed was one. All he needed was Michael. He could kill all of them. Zap, zap, and you're dead. Michael could have done that because he killed 185,000 Assyrians in one night. So we didn't need 10 legions, did he? So he hath. And then he says, He hath determined the timing of everything, which was before appointed. That word appointed is the word protasso. Protasso. Pro means before. Tasso means an orderly arrangement. Tasso is the word used in Acts 13:48. As many as were ordained to eternal life believe. That word ordained is tasso. And then he says, let's finish this verse. If the timing was before appointed, he has determined the timing of everything, and it was an arrangement, protasso, and the bounds of their habitation. What is their referring to? To the timing of every event. Habitation, that's an interesting word. That's very interesting. Bounds is the word horothosia, Horothosia. Horothosia, it means a limit, a boundary. Timing has a boundary. You know what he's talking about? It's just like a housing of a transmission. It can only work inside that housing. And this can only work within the housing. And the bounds of the timings, habitation. Habitation is katokia. O-I-K-I-A. Oikia means house. This is a housing. Means to settle down. Kata means down. It means to house down, settle down. There's a housing for all actions in the world. All of them. And I keep saying God's declared everything that's happening. Everything. The good and the evil. What for? For His glory. God, this is why I believe in witnessing everywhere I go. God will be just as glorified in casting all the vessels of wrath into hell as He will to take us to heaven. God willing to show His wrath and make His power known. He endured in long suffering the vessels of wrath, fitted to destruction. They were fitted to just be destroyed. They were made that way to glorify God. I don't understand that, but I believe it. A lot of things I don't understand that's in the Bible, but I believe it because it's there. Why would God make hell? Why wouldn't He make all of us perfect without any catches in us, without any sin in us? He's going to do that in eternity to all the elect, isn't He? Why did He do that in the beginning? He didn't want to. He does His wants. He does what He pleases. Having predestinated us unto the adoption of children by Himself according to the good pleasure of His will, because He wants to. I don't understand the want to of God. If that door if you could open that and look into hell, and the people were screaming and yelling, ah! Would you let them out? Would you bring them out if you could? Yeah, you would, and I would too, but God won't. Do I understand that? No. Why do I believe it? Because it's in this book. I believe the book against everything that everybody says. I don't care what they say. I believe this book. Period. Now, let's finish this up. He hath appointed a day, chapter 17, verse 31 of Acts. He hath appointed a day which He will judge the world in righteousness by that man whom He hath ordained. Hath ordained. I don't know why they didn't put it in dark letters, but that is horizo. And by the way, that is an aorist indicative verb. It's a past tense verb. It was done before the world began. He's ordained everything that's happening. He said, I've declared the end from the beginning, and from ancient times, everything that's not yet done. That would be every accident, every car wreck, every house burning down, every cancer, everything that's not yet done, saying, my counsel shall stand and I'll do all my pleasure. God says, I do everything I want to do. I don't understand the want to of God, but you don't have to understand the want to of God to believe Him. You just believe Him because He says it. That's what I believe. That is aorist indicative. That word hath ordained. And then the last time that horizo was mentioned is in Hebrews 4 and 7. He limiteth a certain day, saying in David, today, after so long a time, as it is said, today you will hear His voice, harden not your heart. The word limiteth is the word horizo. It's present tense, active voice. Now, let's flip over to the next page. Horion. This is a form of horizo. Horion. These are, I gave you that paper. That I took the paper out. I made copies out of my concordance because I wanted to see it's the way your concordance will read. It's the way your concordance will read. You got 27, excuse me, my glasses. You got 37:24. That's horizo. That's horizo, and pro-horizo is predestinate. And then you got horion, H-O-R-I-O-N. Remember, the H's are just a diacritical mark, but they put the H in there for your simplification. And then you have horkizo. These are all morphemes. They're word shapes. They come from the same word. They're morphemes. It comes from morphe, meaning shape. Meaning shape. That's an old word, and that's all it means. I said something about metamorphosis. I learned in high school that was the development of a grasshopper, metamorphe. It was the shaping of a grasshopper from just a small little grasshopper to a grown one. It's called a metamorphosis. Morphe, it's the shaping. And then you've got horkizo, and then you have horkos. These are all word shapes that are forms of horizo, horkos. And you read that, you can see that in your concordance when you're looking at it. And then you have horkomosia, horko. Whenever you're looking at your concordance, whenever it says C and it gives you a number, it means this is a construction of this number. And when it says, if you'll notice under Horion, it says horos, H-O-R-O-S. The diacritical marks there. Horos, and it will tell you it means bound or limit. Or limit. Horos. Remember I told you when they translated the Septuagint and they translated it from Hebrew around 200 BC, from Hebrew to Greek. This is the Old Testament they translated. LXX, Septuagint. I got a copy of the Septuagint at home. I should have brought it with me. I even have a Septuagint concordance. And it'll tell you that these guys that translated the Septuagint, they were brilliant in Greek and brilliant in Hebrew. And I've read much on it, and they say this is one of the best, most straight translations that's ever been made of any book. And what they did, when they came to the word border, they translated that, these translators translated to two horos. Horion. That means a bound, a border, or a limit. Let me see if I can put this in simple words. I kept saying, if you have Israel, and it was the kingdom of light, or the kingdom of the horizon, which is the light, which is the light, which is the truth. There was a border to Israel, and all the time you find the word border, translated into the Septuagint is the word holos. So inside is the light, or is the horizon. Inside of Israel is the light, or the truth. And notice how this connects with bottomless pit. Notice how it connects. Bottomless pit is A-B-U-S-S-O-S. It's not a bottomless pit. That's the stupidest translation. I can't believe those guys did that. It comes from bathos, or bathizo, which is the verb form. And bathos means something with great knowledge. And when you translate, when you have the alpha as a negative particle in front of a word, that's what a busos, or bottomless pit, is. It means a place of no knowledge. Well, outside of Israel, nobody had the truth. No one. There was no knowledge. That's why they called it a bottomless pit. Let me see if I can find a map here. All right. That's why outside of Israel, there was no knowledge of God. If this is Israel on the eastern end of the Mediterranean, all this was the bottomless pit, because there was no knowledge of God, not until Acts, the 2nd chapter, when God poured out of His Spirit His truth on all flesh. They didn't have any knowledge of God. This was the bottomless pit. They even called the sea. That's where the beast rose up out of the sea. The beast was Babylon, Persia, Greece, Rome. What it was. And it came up out of the sea. Is that pretty simple to see? Wouldn't you say that? The beast coming up out of the sea? The beast came up out of a place of no knowledge. If you notice, the scorpions come out of the bottomless pit, the place of no knowledge. Scorpions are false teachers there in Revelation 9. So that's the same thing. If you'll notice, this is not hard, it's simple. If you define the words. Now, let me read something to you. I want you to go back, and this will connect directly to Christmas. Directly. Look back here at Hosea. Hosea. I read this to you the other day. Hosea, the 5th chapter, I believe it is. Or 4th chapter. Hosea. All right. The 5th chapter of Hosea, and starting in verse 9. Ephraim, which is northern Israel, Ephraim, the second-born son of Joseph, received the inheritance of Israel, there in the 48th chapter of Genesis. So anytime you see Ephraim, all through this book, after he's dead, it's talking about the 10 northern tribes, Samaria. Ephraim shall be desolate in the day of rebuke. How did God rebuke him? He carried them away into captivity in northern Israel by the Assyrians. You can read about that in 2 Kings, the 17th chapter. How the Assyrians came in and carried them away. Ephraim shall be desolate the day of rebuke among the tribes of Israel. Have I made known that which shall surely be? The princes of Judah, that's southern Israel. Judah was the two southern tribes, Judah and Benjamin. And they began to participate in the same thing that northern Israel, when Jezebel and Ahab's daughter married Jehoram in southern Judah, the king, and took their gods down into southern Judah. Baal in the Grove and all the rest. The princes of Judah were like them that removed the bound. When they translated that word bound, they translated in the Septuagint, horos. They removed the border. How did they do that? Well, I'll show you how they did. They were supposed to stay inside the light, but they went into Lebanon, or Tyre and Sidon, and Ahab married Jezebel and brought the gods of Tyre and Sidon into Israel, and they included Tyre and Sidon in their religion when they worshiped Baal and the Grove. So they increased their borders there. Oh, wait a minute. They brought into their Israel, brought in their kingdom. This is not the exact shape. There's the shape over here. They brought the Assyrians, which were right here. They brought the Syrians, not the Assyrians. They brought the Syrians' god, Rimmon. And they brought that into Israel and worshipped it. Then they brought in, they're moving the boundary to include the Syrians' gods, and they moved the bound to bring in the gods of Ammon. They moved the boundary. The gods of Ammon and the gods of Moab. The chief god of Moab was Shemash. Shemash was the sun god of Moab, and Shemash is the word sun in the Hebrew. And in Ammon, they worshiped the god Molech. This is how they moved the bounds. And that included Molech, Moloch, Milcom, Malcolm, and all these gods of Ammon. So they're moving the bound. And then they moved the bound to bring in the gods of Egypt. All those gods of Egypt were Venus and Osiris and Isis, and the list goes on and on and on. And when you go to Ezra, the 9th chapter, they included the gods of the Ammonites, the Perizzites, the Jebusites. All these ites, they worshipped all their gods. That's how they moved the bound. They just took them into their fold. That's why God scattered them. And that was the same system that was brought in the church and renamed Christ's Mass. You think, if God's that angry with Israel to scatter them for 2,600 years, from 586 BC to May 14, 1948, you think that's enough anger for God to bring great judgment on America? Yes, sirree. That's what's happening in the Middle East. I'm going to talk about that Sunday. Because of this right here, because they moved the bound to include all those sun and tree gods. I know that's what's happened, and I know what's happening in the Middle East, and I'm just sick of America. There's something wrong with Christmas. If Babylon mothered all idolatry, and the only reason Constantine brought this idolatry in the church was to pacify the heathen and the apostate Christians in the church at Rome, which became the Catholic Church, you think that he's not angry at us? You think he's not angry with America? He is. Removing the bound is what has inflamed the wrath of God. You can't, he's got a boundary line you have to go by. Now, how much time do I have, Mike? 19. Let's look at some more of this paper. So, see Orion there on page 3? This is page 3, Orion. Horus, boundary limit, boundary line, mark out, bound, appoint, decree. And every time you find the word coast in the New Testament, it is the word Horus. It's that word Orion, and we get the word Horus, or boundary line from it. That's the boundary. What do you have to do in the boundary? Look at the bottom of that page at 3726 down here, or horkidzo. Horkidzo means to adjure, to charge. It means to swear. Let me put it this way. If this is Israel, do you have to swear allegiance to God? You can't swear to... They would swear by the gold of the temple. God says, that's not going to help you. You can't swear by that. You're not to swear by anything except the laws of God. And if you're a believer and you're inside the horizo and you don't swear by the laws of God, what does God do? He beats you. He said, I scourge every son I receive. That's amazing. The word receive is dekomai. He has to receive us. Dekomai comes from the word dek, which is the word 10. A decade is 10 years. And there in Hebrews 12, he says, I scourge every son I receive. Reach out the 10 fingers and accept in. He said, but you can't come into my kingdom without swearing allegiance to me. If you live in Tennessee and you don't keep the laws and you rob banks, what happens to you? You go to jail. If you speed, what happens to you? Get a ticket. If you rob curb markets, what do? They arrest you and put you in jail for 10 years. God says, instead of that, I will beat you with a scourge. If you don't declare, and all of these words trace back to horizo. Horkidzo. Isn't that amazing? Horizo is the sunlight where the light shines. I hope I'm getting that over to you. That amazes me that Mr. Strong, when you look up predestinate, he's got in parentheses, horizon. That's what it is. It's the light, the truth. I don't even know why I can see this and other preachers don't even deal with it. Well, they're not preachers, that's for one thing. I don't know anybody that is a preacher of truth. They're not trying to do the whole truth. Anyway. The word adjure means to swear or to promise God. You look at the next page, page 4. Horkos. That's a form of the same word, horizo. Horkos is and it says horkos, a fence akin to, a limit, sacred restraint, taking an oath. Comes from urkos, means a fence or a limit or a restraint. And you notice the word oath is all the way down through there. You know what that reminds me of? Galatians, the 3rd chapter. Galatians 3. I think of this whenever I see a fence, how you have to be fenced in. Look in Galatians 3. The Bible says, in Galatians, the 3rd chapter, speaking of the believer, before faith, verse 23, before faith came in our lives as believers, we were out there in sin. Before faith came, you're in sin. Because it's planned for faith to come into your life down here. And this is your life of sin, living in darkness. And God has got the horizo planned for you on a certain time to open up your eyes and see. And before faith came, while you were in darkness, while you were a sinner, you couldn't die. Because God has to bring you to faith. Before faith came, we were kept frureo, P-H-R-O-U-R-E-O. P-H-R-O-U-R-E-O. Frureo means to, it's a word that means to watch over us in advance, hem in and protect, put a fence around us so we wouldn't die. We were fenced in, like this word herkos says. We were fenced in. We couldn't die. Before faith came, we were kept under the law, shut up unto the faith. Shut up is sunkleo, S-U-G-K-L-E-I-O. Sunkleo. Sunkleo means to hem in. It means to shut up, to embrace, in common subjection, to enclose or fence in. We were fenced in while we were in sin. Every one of the elect cannot die before they get to truth. When you're in sin, when you come to the knowledge of good and evil and you go right into darkness, you eat of the tree. That's what this is talking about. And if you notice, every time urkos is used, it's oath. It's God's law. You have to bow to His law. And there's one of these I want to... Do I have any time? 13. There's one verse I want to look at in Hebrews, the 6th chapter, verse 17. Hebrews 6, verse 17. I like this verse. This has been one of my favorite verses. I say that all the time. I think the Bible is my favorite verse. 6:17. Wherein God willing more abundantly show unto the heirs of promise the immutability of His counsel. Immutability is ametathatos. A-M-E-T-A. A-M-E-T-A-T-H-E-T-O-S. This is the alpha privative. This means changeable. This means unchangeable. His oath is unchangeable to us. He said, I'll scourge you when you're inside my boundary line, my horion, my horos. I'll scourge you. And look over here. Now flip your page over. I've already explained that, Acts 17:26. So flip again. Flip again. And he's talking about when they translated, I've got Septuagint written down halfway through the page, LXX. And I've got just a couple of verses on the bounds. And in Hosea 5 and 10, the princes of Judah were like those that removed the bound. The word bound is gibul in the Hebrew, Gebul, or it can be spelled Gebuwl. And that is the same word they translated over to horos, meaning boundary. And then he says here in Job 14 and 4, let's look at this. Job 14 and 4. I've never gone through this paper like this, to this extent. It's something I drew up years ago, and I kept wondering, Lord, when am I going to use that? Well, it came to the place where I need to use it. Job 14 and verse 4. Let's read 1 through 4. 14 and verse 1. This is about the sovereign will of God, that you cannot bring yourself into light. You cannot change your life. You cannot, there's a boundary on your life. There's a horos. 14. I just flipped over here to 4. All right. 14 verse 1. Man that is born of woman is a few days and full of trouble. Boy, is that true? Yes, it is. He cometh forth like a flower, and he's soon cut down. He's like, James says, he's like the wind. It just blows him down. He's like a shadow. I'm 84, but it feels like I was young just a few months ago. It doesn't seem like long. It seems like the other day I graduated from high school. I was standing out in front of Bowman High School. I was 18. And Catherine was a girl that went to our church. And I said, Catherine, would you back my car up? And I had an old 49 Chevrolet that had a hole in the floorboard. She ran over my foot. I remember that like it was yesterday. He cometh forth as a flower and is cut down. He fleeth as a shadow and continueth not. And dost thou open thine eyes upon such a one, and bringest me into judgment with thee? Who can bring a clean thing out of unclean? Nobody can clean themselves up. You can't make yourself clean by making a decision for Christ. You're dead. Seeing his days are determined, karots, decided. The number of your days are decided, CHARATS. Karots. They're decided. It's like a stake on a boundary line. You can't get out of it. Everybody's got a day they're going to die, and you can't live 1 second past that or die 1 second before it. It's appointed unto man once to die. Appointed apokime means it's set. His days are determined, and the number of his months are with thee, Lord. Thou hast appointed his bounds. When they translated that in the Septuagint, they translated it horos. He put a boundary on your life. That's what God did. You don't have to worry about getting old or dying young. It's already set. Just behave yourself, okay? Behave yourself and walk righteously, and you'll live as long as God wants you to live. Thou hast appointed his bounds. The word appointed is asah, A-S-A-H. A-S-A-H. It's a set time. It's accomplished. It's made. It's done. That he cannot pass. Turn from him that he may rest. till he shall accomplish as an hireling his day. You're just a man at work for God. Do it. People say, what should we do? Sit down? No. Occupy till he comes. Go about the business of the Lord till he comes. And if somebody's out there and a terrorist and they want to kill you, say, go to it. I don't care if somebody kills me. You know why? The next second I'll be in the presence of God and this old worn body of mine will be done. My body is tired. It's wore out. After 2 heart attacks and 1 open heart surgery and a stroke and bronchial asthma my whole life since I was a kid. That's been the hardest thing to deal with is asthmatic bronchitis. I have it every year in spring and fall. Severely. I'm going through the 8th week of it right now. And I'm miserably happy. I'm thankful that God gave it to me because he got me out of the music business doing that. Can't sing anymore. Thank God for that. Anyway, now, I don't have time to go into this. This is Kittle's Dictionary of New Testament Greek Words. It starts off with horizo, O-R-I-Z-O. I just wrote horizo beside it. And he goes through here and talks about to set a limit, boundary, territory, to a point, limitation is temporal, a point, determined, according to the counsel of God. There's one word. Do I have any time, Mike? 4 minutes. Over here on page 454. This is out of Kittle's New Testament Greek word, aphorizo. Aphorizo comes from apo and horizo. Apo and horizo. Apo means to set off the horizo, to set off a boundary. And when you look at the next page, or the next 2 pages, go 2 pages over, I've got aphorizo. You get this out of the Word Study Concordance, and I've got it circled right here. Aphorizo mentioned 10 times in the New Testament. I've got that circled, and it's number 873. So aphorizo goes along with prohorizo and horizo. And if you'll notice, aphorizo in Matthew 13:49 is sever. He severs the wicked from the just. It's the word separate in Matthew 25:32. He shall separate them one from another, as one divideth the sheep and the goats. The word divideth is also aphorizo. Luke 6:22. Blessed are you when men shall separate you from their company. Separate is aphorizo. And then Acts 13:2. Separate me, Barnabas and Saul, unto the work. Separate is aphorizo. And then 19:9, separated the disciples. Romans 1:1, God separated me unto the gospel. Separated aphorizo. And then he says in Romans 1:1, separated in the gospel. 2 Corinthians 6:17, be separate and touch not the unclean thing, and I will receive you, he says. Galatians 1:15, he separated from my mother's womb to preach the gospel. But I had to go out and kill a bunch of Christians first. And then Galatians 2:12, he withdrew and separated himself. Separate is not always the word aphorizo. Sometimes it's the word hagiadzo. Hagiadzo, A-Z-O. Hagiadzo comes from hagios, which is the word holy. It means single. So when God separates us from the world, he puts us in fire and trials and makes us singularly spiritual. Notice all these words go together in meaning. Well, I'm out of time, and am I? 1 minute. I'm going to be preaching Sunday on the Middle East and what's going on over there. Is this the beginning of the end? Absolutely is. I don't know how long it'll be, but if you want to know what's going on, come and I'll tell you. Because I know what's going on. I started studying prophecy in 1964. I haven't studied it a little bit. I have spent thousands of hours in it. And I really love what's happening. This is all the will of God. Hamas is the will of God. Al-Qaeda is the will of God. And God's going to destroy them. I saw on the TV yesterday some of the Hamas young guys. They look like a bunch of punks out there just starting trouble. Because we got a cause to believe in. No, you don't, because you don't know. Well, let's go, Lord, in prayer. Father, thank you for truth. Thank you for everything you do, the good and the evil, because it makes us strong. We know that. Strengthen us and give us strength to continue this work. We'll praise you for everything and glorify you for all that you do. Fight our battles for us. Lead this ministry where we can reach the world elect. We'll praise you for it all in Christ's name. Amen. You can just read that Kittles. That's very interesting on Predestinate. Well, Tim, how you doing?
One day at a time. Is all I can.
One day at a time. Sweet Jimmy. No, sweet Jesus. And then my older brother, every time it said Jesus in a song, he'd put Jimmy there. He's standing out there in the congregation at 16 or 17. Boy, that was a barn burning message, wasn't it? That was a barn burner, wasn't it? I've never really done that definitive a message on predestination. These last two are just strong. I like it. Oh.
Fly around look like.
Huh?
You know, they look like gnats, but they're white.
Yeah.
Fly through the air all the time.
That's a,
Days, the high days.
let me put this up and I'll come back. Oh,
I needed some of those things. Well, you had one handout there that you said that you liked the best. Which one was it?
I don't know.
Not too long ago you were talking.
I'll be right back. Maybe I'll figure it out. You want to take them from me? Let me get these others. If just a second, I'll talk to you about it.